Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. Welcome to Life and IT Project Management, a Fort Forge podcast bridging life and IT project management in fun and engaging ways for everyone. I am your host, Justice Ayala, a lifelong ITPM enthusiast and a learner. Today we have a fantastic guest, Bob McGannon, who is the co-founder and director of Intelligent Disobedience Leadership Proprietary Limited in Australia, and is the COO of Gwen Pennington Consulting and Coaching. He was the founder of Mindovation Incorporated in the United States and Mindovation Proprietary Limited in Australia. Bob specializes in advanced leadership techniques, entrepreneurship, and strategic program and portfolio management. Bob coaches inexperienced to advanced business leaders from more than 15 countries with a wide variety of industry backgrounds and has delivered keynote addresses to conferences and association meetings around the world. Bob has more than 30 years of IT, project management, business analysis, and operational leadership experience, 18 of those years with IBM. Bob is a certified project management professional by PMI, of course, was a certified executive project manager with IBM, a certified project management coach for the Boeing Corporation, and is currently a honorary adjunct professor at Bond University in Australia. Bob holds university degrees in operations research and mathematics, and is the author of Intelligent Disobedience, The Difference Between Good and Great Leaders, published by Routledge, Oxford, UK. Of course, he's also a LinkedIn instructor with nearly 20 courses on the platform, covering project management, advanced leadership, and outsourcing management. Our topic today is Intelligent Disobedience in 2025, elevating project management beyond compliance. Bob, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Justice. I look forward to our conversation.
To kick off our discussion, let's dive into the concept itself, understanding intelligent disobedience. So I'll start with a question. What exactly is intelligent disobedience and what makes it intelligent?
Let's talk about the origin of the term first. It actually comes from the world of seeing eye dogs. You do not want the seeing eye dog to obey its master's every command, because they could both get hit by a car. Right? You have an electric car coming by, it's not making any noise. You might be at a traffic signal that has a walk, don't walk sign that's also accompanied with a noise, to indicate that it's time to walk. The master tells the dog to go forward because he hears that, but the dog has other information. That is that this electric car that's really quiet is coming down the street, maybe coming around the corner, and is putting them both in danger. So the dog needs to disobey its master and put on the brakes. So you spend 12 to 18 months teaching a seeing eye dog how to behave, and then 12 to 18 months teaching them when not to behave, why not to behave, and how not to behave. The whole intent is to get them safely to their objective. Put that into business terms, it's you as an individual with information that your boss doesn't have, might engage in intelligent disobedience to achieve a goal that you would not achieve by obeying all the rules and achieving the goal that those rules were intended to produce. So that's the essence of intelligent disobedience. You don't go into work, in my description, you don't go into work with like a crazy flaming-haired sort of attitude one day and say, I'm going to be intelligently disobedient. It's something you don't do often, but it's very important when you do it, and you do it in selective situations to create a specific outcome.
Fantastic. So to the benefit of those, especially new PMs, isn't compliance a binary thing? So I expect that they would, of course, have towards becoming certified PMs with the new PMBOK 7th edition. So you have the principles and you have all that. And that applies to whatever enterprise delivery framework in any enterprise, right? So what you're saying, to the benefit of those, is compliance not a binary thing? Aren't you either compliant or not? Where does the balance lie?
On one level, I'd say, yeah, it certainly is binary. And engaging in intelligent disobedience means you probably aren't compliant. You aren't compliant with expectations. You aren't compliant with a specific business process. But there could be compliance that is legally based, and I'd like to describe that in a second. But let's just take the first ones. If you've got a business process that you've put in place that works 99.5% of the time, you've done a really, really good job with a business process. But I've never seen a perfect business process. I really haven't. So let's take a really good one. And there's that 0.5%. Those instances where the business process is not going to yield the outcome that it's intended. If you want to create that outcome, you have to somehow bend the rule, change the rule, not follow the process, whatever the case may be. But you're going to get the outcome that you wouldn't get if you followed the process. So I always tell people to say, what's the more important bit of compliance? Is it following the process or complying with the outcome the process is intended to produce? So if you're looking at it from a process perspective, yeah, you've violated it, right? You're not in compliance, but you've complied with the outcome that you're supposed to produce. One of the things that we need to understand as project managers when we get into this realm of deciding whether you want to engage, and it's appropriate to engage in an act of intelligent disobedience, which would be non-compliant, is the process that you are working with and considering violating, if you will, a legal one. Then it's an entirely different story. But it's interesting. I want to tell you, let me tell you a story, because I love telling stories, okay, of intelligent disobedience. I was once working with some folks that were at a bank. Banking is a pretty regulated industry, right? Mm-hmm. There's a number of things you need to produce for government entities, and producing them accurately is very, very important, right? So we were talking about instances of compiling this report, and I said, well, we can't change that process of compiling this report because it's a compliance related thing. Wait a minute. Is the output and the format of the output and the timing you provide that output regulated? Or is the process that you use to create it and that output regulated? Mm-hmm. If it's the latter of those two, yeah, don't touch the process, or you'd have to be very, very careful in talking with government agencies to talk about whatever this example is to do it properly, right? So there'd be a lot more work before you'd violate that. But if the outcome and what you produce is the compliance element, it shouldn't matter whether you produce this with an automated system, 3 PhDs, or 87 hamsters. It shouldn't matter as long as what you're producing is compliant and it's accurate with what it is you're supposed to produce. Even I say compliance is not necessarily compliance. Yes, if you look at the term and what you're doing, it's binary, to go back to your earlier question. But right. Not necessarily in terms of how you go about engaging in intelligent disobedience and understanding whether something is tied to a legal regulation or whether it's an internal process or just the custom and habit that your organization has that you might do differently. Again, the key to me talking about intelligent disobedience is to produce the outcome that those processes, regulations, and laws, etc., are intended to produce. That's the compliance that I'm most concerned about.
In my experience, you did speak to elements of what control, for example, requirements or regulations are key, delivering those, whether it's process or otherwise. But if anything is not outrightly stated as this is what regulatory work, based on
yes, it's a regulatory tied. Yes,
then you can basically be flexible regarding how you achieve it, right?
That's what I think the objective is. Now, mm-hmm. There's a couple of things associated with that change it. One of the things that you and I talked about in preparing for this is, can you tell whether there's an act, whether an act is an act of intelligent disobedience or not? And when somebody asks me that, I go, no, usually not, because I need to know a lot more about the organization. I need a lot more about the business. Mm-hmm. So let's just take that point of this whole expectation and can you just do this or not? If I'm working in Google is known to make changes on the fly and see what happens with the search engine and then right. collect some data, and then they decide to leave it in or modify it or change it, right? They can make changes and have an organizational philosophy that says, let's experiment. and let's learn, and let's continually look to improve our products, for instance, right? A public utility company who is managing the distribution of power in a city with hospitals and other, critical services, they can't have that same attitude, right? So someone that engages in an act of intelligent disobedience by, pushing the boundaries a little bit in Google, that's going to be a lot easier than, they walk into that same person with that attitude goes into a company like a public utility that's controlling electric distribution. It tries to behave the same way, they'll just explode. It won't happen, right? So you need to understand the environment, the outcomes, the philosophy, the expectations. Good, intelligent disobedience requires a bit of homework.
Great.
You need to understand the organization. You need to understand the purposes. You need to understand the risks. You need to understand the disposition of the people. You need to understand the culture. And you need to understand the expectations of clients. So it's not something I'm going to walk into an organization and I'm going to be there 2 days before I engage in intelligent disobedience. No, that's not going to happen. Right? Because I need to know more. Now, might I try to talk, if I see an instance, might I try to talk to somebody and say, look, in the past I've done this, and, but can I engage in that act myself without doing that? Absolutely not. That would be irresponsible. Or maybe, as someone has said, maybe not so intelligent disobedience, right?
Awesome. So you have spoken to being sensitive and being aware of the context, the enterprise you're working within.
Absolutely.
To be able to execute intelligent disobedience, right? Can you speak a bit more to how can a new or current PM tell if an action is an opportunity for intelligent disobedience?
I think basically the first is you need to understand just the norm and culture of the organization, right? First and foremost, you need to understand that. And you need to understand the players you're dealing with. You need to understand the regulations that may be in place for the products and services that you produce. Okay, you need to understand those fully. The next thing I would say that you need to focus on is your management team, or certainly your first line manager, maybe your second line manager, and what their philosophy is. And it's a really good, by the way, I do this as an interview question before I go into a consulting engagement. And I ask people that if they're going to report in my organization and work on the team that I've put together, I always ask them these questions. But I say, so I'm talking to my manager now, rhetorically. There's this business process. This business process isn't going to yield the outcome that the business process is intended to yield. What do you want me to do if I believe that's the case? Do you want me to follow the business process? Do you want me to come to you with the situation? And if it's something that I have to do more immediately, or you're not, available, what would you like me to do? So basically what you're saying is do I have your blessing or permission to engage in an act of intelligent disobedience? I might not use those terms at first, but that's basically what I'm asking. I want to understand what kind of dialogue, what kind of comfort level that they have. But one of the things also that I look for, and I would encourage everybody to look for, is how does the management team define their job? Let's put it in the project management context. If my job description basically boils down to say, follow the project methodology and deliver outcomes, all right, that you've defined my job to manage the process. But if my job description says deliver good stuff, right? That's an entire, okay, good. The methodology is a tool to deliver good stuff, but it's not the mandated process for doing so, right? Now, there's some organizations where that absolutely is going to be the case, that the mandated process is there. Testing new pharmaceuticals, for instance, right? There is a very specific regime that you have to go through and steps you have to take with reports you have to produce in order to, ultimately release a drug, even for, ongoing clinical trials, not to mention to, for public consumption. There are instances when can't look at it that way. But I want to have that dialogue. I want to understand what my management team thinks of that. And then I ask the question about my staff, the people reporting to me, my project team. How comfortable do I feel giving them the flexibility to engage in intelligent disobedience?
Mm-hmm.
I can't be any more flexible with them without taking a risk than my manager is with me. Because ultimately, if I give them more leeway than my manager gives me, and then something goes awry, I'm going to have to answer the question to the manager. That's not to say I haven't done it before and I haven't taken the risk and say, okay, but it also depends on the nature of the product and the outcome. How could I recover it? How can I explain it to a client, or how can I explain what it is that we were trying to do to, my senior manager, not just my first line manager. So that's part of more refined, more advanced intelligent disobedience, if you will, is, deciding when I'm just going to say, I'm going to take the risk because I think it's worth it in this instance, or I'm going to do something without telling my manager that I'm going to do it. I'll do it. I'll talk to him or her as quickly thereafter as possible. That's more refined intelligent disobedience, if you will, but it's something that I, talk about a lot in the workshops and with people in interviews like this. It's a very interesting, not black and white sort of subject.
In the examples you've given, the use case, the specific scenarios you've given, specific examples, you have somewhat spoken to balancing compliance and innovation, and you sort of like given a guideline, and that guideline, and you can correct me if I ordered it, that guideline seems to be alignment with your reporting manager with regards to what bandwidth and what process should be established if an opportunity for intelligent disobedience, something different from the process presents itself. That's the very first thing you want to do. The second thing you mentioned was being aware of what regulatory requirements there are regarding the specific niche. Then you've also spoken to, of course, clarity regarding being aware of what your role is.
Exactly.
Very, very clear regarding what your role is. Yes. You also spoke to being very clear regarding your team, their capacity, their understanding, and not giving them more leeway than you would get, right?
More often than not, that's the case. I will on occasion, but there's that's going to be rare. But I would do it based on the nature of the importance of complying with the outcome versus complying with the process.
Right. Thank you so much. Now let's zero in on the leader. So, for example, that senior manager or that reporting manager that plays a huge role in all this. Now, what role do they play in encouraging or discouraging intelligent disobedience? Then imagine if any senior manager or director right now wants to create a safe space for their team members and project manager to be able to express dissent. How would they facilitate that?
Sure. I think the first thing is an attitude, and you could tell this relatively quickly by listening, is when something goes other than expected. Are they looking to find out who did it? Or are they looking to find out what happened and how can we learn from it? Anybody that talks about learning moments, learning opportunities, failing forward is a great one, right? Where, okay, we're going to do something. It isn't always going to go well. What did we learn going forward? That's the first thing, right? Is it a learning moment organization, or is it finding who did it organization, right? And or a manager that has that attitude. That's first and foremost. The second is someone that embraces the philosophy of compliance with the outcome versus compliance with the process. And actually, I really, really like it when a manager will say, these processes are flexible, this one is not. I'd like to understand why they say this one is not. But when they discern that, they're giving me a lot of information about their approach and what they think the importance and criticality is of those processes within the organization. And there are some that aren't necessarily tied to regulations, but the custom and customary behavior of the organization, okay, means this is a process you don't vary. A gentleman that I know and have interviewed for my book talked about the fact that he has a certain spending authority. So he can make a decision to spend the company's money $10,000, we'll say.
Mhm.
Near Christmas, most of the managers are gone. A vendor comes to him with look, I need to make my quota before the end of the year. I'm going to give you this deal on this thing we're talking about buying. And it was more than $10,000, but it was a great deal for the company. So he signed off on it. Manager, when ultimately it came back, the manager said, well, you violated your financial authority. He goes, but it was a great deal for the company. He goes, we don't care. Don't do that again. Okay, that's an area where intelligent disobedience in that organization is not going to be well accepted. Has nothing to do with any other law other than the internal law of the organization, thou shalt not do this, right? I don't mind when management has that sort of flexibility and shares that. That's part of the homework we need to understand to do intelligent disobedience properly, right? That's very encouraging to me because I understand where I can go and where I can't go without having a lot more conversation and sharing what it is that's going on. So management that'll share that information and understands that information themselves is very, very valuable. Learning moments versus blame, understanding limits and boundaries and being able to describe them, okay, in terms of behavior, and understanding the concept of compliance with the process versus compliance with the outcome, I think are the three things that I always look for.
I was spoken to the leader's role. Now we want to speak to the project managers and team members' role, specifically ethical and professional considerations, right?
Sure.
How can intelligent disobedience impact the team's dynamics and trust within a project team? And if we can speak to potential risks and benefits.
Again, let me tell you a story, or let me suggest an analogy in a story to describe this. You're an employee working in an organization, you're a team member working on a project, okay? You have to follow a particular process for creating some deliverables, okay? Mm-hmm. You know that those deliverables in this particular project aren't going to be that useful. You've been told to create a purchasing plan when you have no intention of having to purchase anything, right? Just a, contracting plan, right? Mm-hmm. But you go through the process, just in case. That person goes home. Same scenario, another person can make a decision whether producing a purchasing plan is necessary. They look at the project, they look what's going on, and go, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to write a 1 or 2 sentence thing that says, we'll do this if needed, put something away, and then they work on something that's really worthwhile and helping deliver the project outcomes. Mm-hmm. Which one of those two people do you think is happier when they go home at night? Right? This is, allowing for intelligent disobedience, promoting intelligent disobedience, and supporting people through the process of learning what they need to learn to engage in intelligent disobedience, and then ultimately supporting them as they do so, is going to make for employees that have a greater sense of ownership for what the project is intended to produce, because you're giving them the latitude to think, to use their skills, to use their information to produce that outcome. The number of times I would project manager come to me, my problem is my team members don't think, and I normally don't blurt this out, but it's screaming in my head is, are you allowing them to think? There's really the core of the message that I would want to share in answering that question. Mm-hmm. Are you allowing your team members to think? Are you doing what I said that that manager, the good manager that will promote the use of intelligent disobedience will do is define where there's flexibility and where there's not flexibility. Set up a process where your team members can make a suggestion and you can be part of helping them and supporting them as they engage in some intelligent disobedience and maybe not doing something, in a process that is normally done in the organization. Create a vocabulary for this notion and boundaries where you can have good, efficient discussions about what makes sense in producing the outcome you need to produce, and not devaluing the process and not devaluing project methodologies, because they serve us really, really well. But there's some things in some projects or in some instances, you can probably best spend your time doing something else. And that's really where intelligent disobedience and projects come together. There's another one that I find really interesting this is a great reflection of a project manager's activity and also the project team's activity. So, I'll be delivering a keynote at a conference, and I love this. I said, how many project managers have too much authority to deliver their project? And there's just laughter, right? No one raises their hand and say they have too much authority, or on occasion it'll be one or two people, right? They always laugh. And I say, okay, how many of you, and I'll use the formal Project Management Institute term of a project charter. Okay. Mm-hmm. But really it's the definition of the project and what the sponsor's authority is and what the project manager's authority is, right? However you label it, I'll call it the project charter. And I say, how many of you participate in writing the project charter? And at least 75% of the people raise their hand. I say, great. Where is the project manager's authority defined? In the project charter. So 75% of you participate in writing the project charter, and none of you have the authority that you'd like to do it. It's like, wait a minute. You wrote the charter. The charter has authority in it. Put things in the charter and ask for authority. Don't do it like, sneak it in and just hand the signature page to your sponsor, right? So you got authority. I mean, obviously, okay. But it's a great time early on, engaging in a little bit of intelligent disobedience and trying to get yourself a little more authority. It's a great time to open up that dialogue with your sponsor. 3 things can happen. 1, they say, yes, woohoo, you got more authority. 2, they say, no. Okay, that's fine. I just, but here's why I was asking for this and what my concerns are. So you have a really good dialogue, about this. The third thing is they don't care. Is it yes or no or whatever you think? And then, okay, that's fine. You've got a sponsor. You now know that your sponsor may not be as engaged as you'd like them to be. So, there's a bit of behavior you'd want to change in that, but they've signed off on the project charter and you've got more authority. Just use it very wisely in that case, right? So those are really the 3 outcomes. None of them to me are bad because you're going to learn something or you're going to get more authority. That to me is a great day.
The things you've said speak to sort of like an informal training and development situation where in the event, hopefully you don't have a business sponsor hard pressed with a regulatory project. So you don't have that leeway to even, do that.
Right.
But let's create a scenario where it's not a regulatory project, right? As a strategic initiative, how would the project manager train his or her team when it comes to intelligent disobedience? I don't expect that they wouldn't probably have formal bandwidth for training, but how would they train their team? That's one. Then number 2, second part of that question is, at what point do they begin to incorporate matrices if something worked or did not work, and adopt that as a practice, sort of like going for.
First thing is they're actually, I've worked with organizations that want to incorporate this into their management style, and they actually have definitions of intelligent disobedience. They do talk about intelligent disobedience, and it is a formal process. One of the things you said is not entirely true. It's certainly not the majority, right? But there are organizations that are embracing this, and it's really enjoyable to work with them, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And they get great outcomes as a result, mostly. Now, sometimes people get a little bit overzealous and they have to reel people in. But, it's really interesting when you're talking to a client or someone, say, someone kind of, was looking to create an outcome and they went a little bit too far. So we have to, accommodate this or whatever. And and in the end, the negative outcomes aren't very long lasting. Unless someone really goes crazy. Again, if you're having that dialogue, those definitions, those boundaries, and they're going to be supported, it works really well. Actually, the best way to go about this, I describe it to people, is to have intelligent disobedience in stages. Right? The new person, first of all, you as a project manager, I talked about the homework. You need to know what's legal and what's not. You need to know what the norms of the organization are. You as a project manager can teach that, can profess that, can reinforce that with your project team members. Okay. When you're talking about let's do what's right to create the right outcome. I think it's also to say, this is not a matter of convenience. Sometimes following the process is not convenient, but if following the process is going to create the outcome, there's no reason not to follow the process unless, the process is going to take 10 days and there's a really compelling business reason we get this thing done in 2. Then maybe there's room for intelligent disobedience there, right? But you have to weigh the risk associated with that. And teaching people and working with people on weighing those risks and what does that mean is part of supporting a atmosphere that will promote intelligent disobedience. One of the things that I would talk about, and I emphasize people to talk about on their project status meetings, whether you hold them, once a week or once every other week, whatever the case may be, is what obstacles do we have to us? And sometimes it's just, a pretty traditional risk, but sometimes it's, this process is making this, and you encourage that. And so, okay, how can we avoid this obstacle and what are the risks associated with avoiding this obstacle? So you should be using really familiar project management type of language, right? And talking about risks and talking about issues and talking about outcomes. But you make that a regular part of the conversation. And, people will engage in intelligent disobedience and it'll be absolutely spot on. There's people that engage in intelligent disobedience. It'll create the outcome they want, but there'll be some fallout. You create a full circle process. Let's talk about that fallout. Could you have done it without creating that fallout? Are there communication you could have done, or could you take a different approach, right? You're ultimately taking a learning moment. You're making it a learning moment. You're making it a full circle process. And it's understanding that this is an exception. Always, always, always an exception. And I think the other thing is ethics. And you mentioned ethics very, very briefly in a question earlier, but we went to something else. And I want to make sure I capture this, because when I talk about intelligent disobedience and I wrote my book, I wanted to be very, very careful that I wasn't giving people an excuse for bad behavior.
Most importantly, yes.
I've read this in this book. I think it's a great idea. I can do it. That's bad behavior, right? So I wrote a chapter and I called it a higher form of ethics. To me, it is to think consciously about delivering the right outcome is in that compliance is more important than the compliance of following the process. Again, we're weighing the consequences of that associated with it. So I have the fundamental ethical premises associated with this. I just want to pull them out of the book, make sure I don't forget one. You do not perform acts of intelligent disobedience for your own benefit. It's for the benefit of the business that you're supporting. You might get some good benefits associated with it, but that's not why you do it. You're doing it for the business. Second, you're not violating process or taking another usual action as a matter of course or because of convenience, which is one of the things that I mentioned. You're also not doing this in a passive-aggressive manner. You don't sit in a meeting and say, yes, I'll do that, and then walk out of the meeting and go, golly, that's just horrible and unnecessary. And then I'm going to engage in an act of intelligent disobedience and not do it and try to justify it. In the meeting, you challenge the process. You don't do this in a passive-aggressive sort of manner. So you're not doing it as a protest against formal structures or processes. And if you can communicate this ahead of time to a management team, your manager, that you think this is the right thing to do versus just doing it, that's fine. That is not to say there aren't times and instances where, and I do love this phrase, and I think it embraces intelligent disobedience, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. But again, you have to be careful with that without, understanding the culture, understanding the laws and regulations and that sort of thing. I said, so for the most part, if you can communicate it ahead of time, that's actually the better way to go if you're going to engage in an act of intelligent disobedience. So that's my ethical framework around it. And I think it's really important when you are a project manager or a manager talking about intelligent disobedience and trying to instill a culture that is an okay way to act. It's not universally an okay way to act. You have to understand the roles and boundaries associated with it, and the ethics associated with it are of utmost importance. I actually do an hour-long presentation on this that I've delivered a lot of PMI meetings called "The Rules for Breaking the Rules," which people seem to enjoy. We have a little bit of fun with that while we're talking about some really serious topics.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for going back to, apologies for being
Oh,
brief.
no. That's okay. I was going to talk about it because to me, it's a very important basis that I'd like to, or a foundation I want to lay for the whole concept of intelligent disobedience. Again, being very conscious of not giving people an excuse for bad behavior.
The next question speaks to personal experience. Now, not just personal experience, applying the personal experience. So based on what you have been through and how you have supported projects and programs and possibly portfolios and companies, for anyone going into, now let me just say anyone, let me say for project managers going into 2025, drawing from your experience and knowledge, what would you recommend? How would you recommend they implement intelligent design for companies that don't have detailed sort of processes all through, in many cases, for companies open to, or let's be precise, for a Google company, for example, and for a utility company, for example, to project management?
I think the actions are the same. I would suggest a few things. One is you need to define what you would engage in intelligent disobedience to do. And I think it's describing the notion of having, I want to comply with the outcomes you're trying to create as a more important element than the process. But let's make sure that we understand when that is not viable. So if you're in the public utility, you want to make a change to the software logic that's in your power distribution grid. That's probably something where you're going to want to go through a very, very rigorous testing process, right? Because you don't want to shut down your city. But that's not all a public utility does, right? I have a number of different other activities that they engage in. Again, you're defining boundaries. I talk about that. Really, organizations that embrace intelligent disobedience successfully, projects that embrace, and project managers that embrace intelligent disobedience successfully take the time to talk about the concepts and define boundaries and have a full circle process after someone's engaged in intelligent disobedience. Say, is that the outcome that you wanted? What can we learn from this? How can you refine your intelligent disobedience? Did you communicate it ahead of time if you should have and could have? And, okay, so you make it a learning. There's learning moments. Even when you do it well, there's potential learning moments. And it's having that approach, regardless of whether you're going into Google or into a public utility. Now, a public utility is regulated. Google is not necessarily by all the same sort of things. So, it's also understanding where there's external entities that might pass a judgment on this act of intelligent disobedience, not just internal people. So you need to understand. One other area that I think is really interesting, I've been talking with project managers and just managers in general about this, is what's your philosophy? What are your rules, ground rules for using AI? I don't know necessarily whether it creates a boundary for intelligent disobedience or not. In some instances, it probably does. But if there isn't a philosophy for, using AI and how you're going to use AI, propose one.
Definitely.
There's a gentleman that I know, a colleague on LinkedIn Learning named Dave Burss, BIRSS is his last name. And he's got, in one of his courses and on his website, daveburss.com, he's got what he's called the AI Manifesto. It's a set of his idea of a set of rules and restrictions and support elements for using AI, and when you want to use it, when you don't want to use it, and when you want to use it and communicate that you've used it in some. I think it's brilliant. Great place to start. And do you want to create a risk plan using AI? Do you want to just take it out of what AI spits out and say that's your risk plan? No. Right? What kind of reviews do you want to do? What kind of scrutiny do you want to do? Do you want to apply to it? Right? I would support using AI to get to create a risk plan as a starter kit versus other starter kits you might have. Might some good ideas. That is a really good, rich current topic for 2025, where engaging in some intelligent disobedience or defining the boundaries of what would be intelligent in intelligent disobedience using AI is a brilliant way to go forward. Regardless of the organization, I think my answer is the same. Just that, You might want to do more intense homework in one environment than in another.
And the other. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. We'll probably have the opportunity to another podcast recorded, but diving into the topic of AI, then consciousness, then AGIs, humanoids, involving humanoids in project management and all that, and the boundaries for that, the intelligent boundaries for that. That's a different.
It's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? Yes, indeed.
It's a different thing entirely, and we wouldn't be able to take that here, but we probably have that. So yes, you have spoken to thoughts on beginning to integrate intelligent disobedience in existing processes as processes evolve, as we go into 2025, as AI also evolves, right? Understanding the context, understanding the industry, understanding the regulations, understanding your senior manager would inform how you basically implement intelligent disobedience. That happens to be the last question, but let me toss one in. When it comes to risk management at a program level, because many enterprises, depending on how large you are, you have the program, you have the portfolio and all that. So at a program level, when it comes to risk management and you're closely tracking your RAID across board, across projects, how would you make sure that you incorporate intelligent disobedience across, but from a program perspective, not from a project perspective, right? From a program perspective.
Okay. Let me sort of launch into a little bit of a different subject I want to talk about risk management at that level. If I'm a program manager, and I've been a program manager a number of times, sometimes a program can be a really, really substantial piece of an organization's strategy implementation. When we create a risk, you don't just do low, medium, or high probability. I want to take impact and not just say low, medium, or high. I want to take the impact. If a risk comes to fruition, is the impact of that going to be at a project level? So that's going to affect a project within my program? Is it going to be at a program level, meaning it's going to affect multiple projects within my program? Or is it an organizational level? Because it's going to put such a potential impact on this program of work that it could actually really have an impact on the organization. So I'm talking about a whole different level of classification of impact in addition to low, medium, and high, or describing low, medium, and high differently, you might say, right? Or I'll say it's a high impact, but we can constrain it to the project. It's a high impact, we can constrain it to the program and accommodate it. Or it's, this is going to have an organizational implication. What you do with intelligent disobedience and how much flexibility you have in engaging in intelligent disobedience is going to tie to those impacts and the level of that, high, medium, and low, and the level of that impact, right? And how much you would want to have, discussions about this and with whom before you go forward, something like that. So to me, you've got to look much more thoroughly at the probabilities and the extent of the impact of what might happen. Engaging in an act of intelligent disobedience when there's a high impact of a risk that's going to have an organizational level impact. You might want to put a boundary around that one, right? Exactly. I mean, you're talking about boundaries. So that's how I, try to take this project thinking, incorporate it with the intelligent disobedience thinking, and go forward from there. And it's a great way actually to create boundaries. Like say, look, if it's a medium or a low impact, you're an experienced project manager working on this program of work. If it is a low or medium impact risk, and you can contain it to your project, you engage in intelligent disobedience, you could tell me about it afterward. If it's going to be a high impact on your project, I'd really rather you talk to me first. If it's going to be at a program level, we really need to talk about it, and we'll get other people involved in the conversation, right? I mean, I just use that as an example, okay? But it's a great way to set boundaries and expectations. So we, as a team, when it is going to impact the team, are thinking about whether that potential act of disobedience is intelligent and is going to be good in the front. And then we could support the person that does it with that engages in that act if there are impacts that we have to deal with. And so we could talk about it with our stakeholders and that sort of thing. So it really fits well from a project management point of view to use risk management as a base of boundarying, if that's a word, I'm going to say it is, keep going, right? Creating boundaries around intelligent disobedience.
Bob, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on intelligent disobedience and project management. As you spoke, I kept remembering there was one word I didn't want to mention at all, but as we close out, I'll mention it. So it keeps taking me back to the first time enterprises started thinking about placing some projects on some agile adoption models, right? Right? In some way, yes, applying intelligent disobedience to how some project managers had to go around, okay, there's a way waterfall projects go, or there are ways projects were being executed, established processes were put in place, and all that. Now, how do we do this in an agile way? Is it intelligent? What are the boundaries of this? So that has not been fully embraced at all, and I don't think it really would by most, depending, especially for a utility company.
Yeah.
But definitely, even whether it's waterfall or agile, whatever process the world eventually embraces, intelligent disobedience, I think, will be a common thread because standards will always be in place. Some people say rules are created to be broken.
Yeah, and like I said, I always put in the right circumstance on the end of that. Yes. Right? Because I don't ever want to give people the impression that I am not a supporter of rules and process. I am actually a huge supporter of rules and process when they create the outcome that they're intended to create.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. That's what they're there for, to create those outcomes and to give us some predictability in doing so, which is great for the team, great for the project manager, great for our stakeholders. They understand what we're going to do. They expect what we're going to do, and we behave to their expectations, and we deliver what it is that we're supposed to deliver. Processes and rules do that. But again, I've never found a perfect one. There's always that example, that instance, that circumstance is like, oh, wait, that's not going to work here.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what we're talking about.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners for tuning into Life and IT Project Management. Join us next time for more discussions on advanced project management practices. Bob delivers keynotes, workshops, coaching, and maybe mentoring.
Yes. And if I may, we've been talking about this subject in my book, Intelligent Disobedience, the difference between good and great leaders, available on Amazon and hopefully some other places that you can get to as well. And I am one of only two Bob McGannons on LinkedIn. And I'm the only one that's got this like glowing white hair. So please, if there's questions about intelligent disobedience, I love talking about this, helping people try to experiment with it in their own environments or whatever. I am more than happy to answer questions if you just reach out. So reach out to me, send me a message or a question, connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got a newsletter. I talk about intelligent disobedience quite a bit, and I encourage you to do that.
Right. And the website is
www.intelligentdisobedience.com. You could reach me that way as well.
Exactly. Now, if you have learned something from this video, please like this video. Don't forget to subscribe and click the subscribe and bell notification button if you wish to continue to get great content connecting life and IT project management. Now, until our next show, remember, you can be everything you choose to be because every man is the architect of his own fortunes. Take care.